Welcome to the Teachers on Fire podcast, where 21st century educators come to share, learn, and be inspired. We believe in the growth mindset, creativity, communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and strategic uses of education technology. Our mission is to share news and views from teachers who are crushing it in the classroom and making a difference for learners everywhere. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Let's jump into today's episode. Today I'm speaking with Tonya Gilchrist. Tonya is a literacy coach and MYP language and literature teacher at Tokyo International School, a consultant, speaker, and presenter. Tonya is a passionate advocate for learner agency, inquiry mindset, and joyful leaders. Tonya, thanks so much for joining us from Japan today. Are you ready to talk education?
Definitely, of course.
That's the right answer. Let's jump into this. Why don't you start by setting up your current teaching or education situation? Tell us what you're involved in right now.
Yeah, so I'm currently working at Tokyo International School in Tokyo, Japan. And I've been here, I'm just wrapping up my third year at TIS. Our school is really an awesome place to be. I'm so happy there. Something that's really special about it is it's an international school, but unlike many international schools, it's what some would say truly international, in that we have 58 nations represented. So, and I come from a background of teaching for several years, teaching and coaching in the United States. So it's been such a great learning opportunity for me to be in an environment where I have students from all over the world in one class, and what we learn from each other is just really fantastic. So we're a smaller school relatively compared to some others. So we have about 360 students. It will be our enrollment next year. But I actually really like that. We're K through 8. We're a K to 8 school. But since we are a bit smaller, it really helps everyone stay connected with our parent community as well. So it's like we're one big family, which is really special. I feel just so blessed and thankful to be there. And everyone, like all of the staff, are very innovative and passionate. So it's been a really good growing opportunity for me. I currently work there as a literacy coach, and then also an MYP, which is our middle years program. So a middle school language and literature teacher. So those are my two primary roles at TIS. And then I also work as a literacy consultant with Literacy Consulting International, which is headed by Erin Kent, and she's just amazing. So definitely those listening, if they're not connected with Erin on Twitter and Facebook, they should, because she's a fantastic resource. So I do a lot of work with her with schools around the world, helping them implement Readers and Writers Workshop and really amplify inquiry in everything they're doing. Yeah, so that's our current situation. And I should mention too that TIS, the school I'm currently at, another thing that makes it a bit unique is it's a teachers college reading and writing project school, but also an IB World School and an Apple Distinguished School. So we have all these different things going on, but that's something that's been really exciting to be a part of, is figuring out how to marry all those things and have them work together to make the best learning environment we can for students.
Well, that is a very unique environment. I'm still thinking about 58 nations represented, and I'm sure your teaching staff is diverse as well, and you've got a number of special programs happening there, Tonya, so very cool experience. Now, we're going to start at something a little bit lower, a little less bright. Tell us about a low moment that you faced in your teaching or education career. We all have them. And then how you overcame this challenge.
Yes. And, I have to say, as a fan of the podcast, I love that you include this question. That's something that I've really appreciated listening to other guests on the show. What they bring and what they share, because this is something that we all face. And I think it's really great that you bring it up as a talking point, because even though it's talking about a low moment, I think for a lot of us as listeners, it's encouraging to know we're not alone in different types of situations and that we keep learning from the experiences. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so when I was thinking about this, I think for me, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I taught for several years in the US before moving to teach abroad. And when I was about 8 years into my career as an educator, as a teacher and coach, I was just feeling completely uninspired and down in my teaching. And I think the main impetus for that was there was so much focus being put on standardized testing. It was really becoming like the be all end all of the district I was working in. And quite frankly, it was sucking the joy out of teaching and learning for me. And I feel for my students too. I felt like I really didn't have any creativity or autonomy in my teaching. It was very much, we were a large district, and it was becoming a setup of, every teacher of this subject should be doing this lesson on this day, which is definitely not true to what I believe with teaching, where it's more about what are our learners doing, and that your plans are fluid and flexible based on what they need, and what's happening in the classroom. So that was really hard, even though I'd wanted to be a teacher since I was in, I think, third grade maybe was when I first decided I wanted to be a teacher, and then it just stuck with me. To have that moment where you're feeling like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It doesn't feel joyful anymore. Was really, really challenging. And I remember talking with my husband and close friends, and just being like, what should I do? I don't know what to do. I'm not happy. When starting my career, it was like every day was a joy to go to work because I loved working with the kids.
Right,
so it was quite a contrast. I even found myself, literally Googling, like, what else can I do with a teaching degree? So it was pretty, I pretty much, like, I just could not do it anymore. But that's actually what led me to discovering that there was this whole world of international education, was through that Googling, when I really didn't even realize that was quite a thing. I mean, it seems so obvious now. Of course, there are international schools around the world, but I didn't realize that it was quite the arena that it is, and that the opportunities were there. So I ended up talking to my husband about it, and we took the leap and moved abroad, and started off in Thailand and now in Japan. And I'm so glad that I did that, especially that I've gotten the opportunity to work in IB education, because the IB program is all about inquiry-based education, conceptual understandings, lifelong learning. That's really the core of what the organization believes in, and that's the core of my beliefs too. So it was like a perfect match, and it was definitely a breath of fresh air for me, coming from the focused on tests, standardized environment that I had been in. So for me, that was, and when I was thinking about this question too, I'm like, now, so what do I say about how I overcame this? Like, I know that I totally recognize not everyone can just pack up and move abroad. That's definitely not the solution here. But I think what helped me and eventually led to that was just really having a strong support system, like having my friends and husband and family there to talk to, and like being able to be honest and real about how I was feeling. And then just thinking outside the box, looking for other opportunities that might not seem as obvious at first, staying true to my values, like knowing this is what I believe in, and so I'm not going to give up on that. Like, I do believe in inquiry-based learning, and in teaching students, lifelong skills to take with them, and all of those things. And then just being willing to be a risk taker, which is something I talk about with students all the time. But then it was kind of a moment where I had to be one too. Like, I had to step up and be willing to take some risks to follow my passions.
Well, that is, first of all, thank you for being so transparent. And yes, that is an inspiring story to me, because, yeah, you didn't just stay in that place of discouragement. You sort of looked at all of your options, and you took a big leap, didn't you? And you're now in a place where you're growing, and you're experiencing another part of the world. If you don't mind me asking, what's your sort of outlook at this point? Is this a sort of a 10-year experience, or is this a permanent move for you and your husband? Or is it year to year?
That's a great question, because what's interesting is when we first decided to take this leap, we thought it would just be a 2-year thing. Many contacts contracts at international schools are usually 2 years initially, like your first contract, and then after that, it's usually a 1-year contract that you sign each time. So since the initial contract was 2 years, we thought this will be a great experience. We're ready for a change. Let's do it. So we went to Thailand first, and we were there 2 years. And then we came to Japan. So after our 2-year contract in Thailand, originally that was supposed to be when we were going to go back to the US, according to our original plan. But, we just loved the experience so much, and we knew that we wanted to continue to grow and experience other places. So, and thankfully we're in a situation where before we went to Thailand, we sold our house that we owned, and we pretty much sold everything that, as far as having any big, furniture, all of that was sold. We just kept mainly mementos and things like that boxed up in my sister's basement, actually. So, we were fortunate to be in a situation where it's like, hey, if we want to do this longer, we can. And so we decided let's do at least one more place, like to experience another culture and another school. So then we got the opportunity to come to Japan. And our contract here was initially 2 years. We fulfilled that. And then we've now stayed on a 3rd year, and we've signed on to stay a 4th year as well. So we love Tokyo and we love Japan. And now, at this point, having experienced that for several years, we're in a place where we do see this as a long-term thing, where we would probably teach and work and coach internationally until retirement, probably, because we just love it. And I feel like we're growing so much from it too. I think it would be hard to, and I think it would be hard to go back, honestly, because I'm still friends with so many of my colleagues from the US who I met during my time working there. And I know they're still facing a lot of the similar challenges that were really bringing me down. And so I think it would be very hard to go back.
Right. Very cool. Well, this is a weird coincidence, Tonya, but just before conducting this interview, I had some relatives here in my living room. I'm recording this at home, and literally half an hour before the interview, they were telling us all about their recent vacation in Japan, and we were getting into bidets and how toilets were. So,
well, because the toilets are amazing here. It sounds like a weird thing to bring up, but they are pretty fantastic. And that would be another part that would make it hard to leave, truly, is the bathrooms here. Yeah, just keeping it real. They're you're living in the future, you feel like. They have, heated seats and like air that blows to dry you off at the end. I mean, all sorts of things. So, in fact, when my sister came here to visit, that's what she said, is they're planning on in a few years building their own home. And she said, I want to build like a Japanese style bathroom in our home and have everything you have in your bathroom, because even the shower, like your shower, so your tub and everything is in a whole room. To itself. So it makes it so easy to just clean and rinse everything off, and like your bathtub fills itself to the exact right temperature based on how you set it, and like does it all automatically. Just little things where you're like, why isn't this all over the world? This is fantastic. So yeah, the bathrooms in Japan are a whole experience for one to come and enjoy. But
well, that's amazing. And yeah, we were hearing some of those luxurious details. So this is
yes.
This is timely. Well, as much as we would love to talk bathrooms and bidets, Tonya, let's get back to education, shall we? Tell us about what it is that ignites your passion for education today.
Well, I'm just so excited to see more and more movement towards embracing, agency for our learners and our students, and empowerment and an inquiry mindset. I think, that's something that many of us have felt passionate about ever since we became educators, but I feel like it's really starting to build momentum and become more, I guess for lack of a better word, more mainstream. So it's exciting to see it being recognized and valued and growing roots, so to speak, and kind of taking the place of more of the old school methods of just students they're just sort of sitting there and setting and getting. Instead, we're really seeing inquiry grow. And I think that's super exciting because it's what's best for our kids. And then as an IB and literacy educator, I'm also especially excited to see that more and more are embracing reading and writing workshop as a framework to then amplify inquiry in their classrooms. I think there's often this misconception that the two, and by the two I mean like IB programs or inquiry-based programs and readers and writers workshop, there seems to be this misconception that the two are at odds, but really they marry so beautifully together. They're both grounded in inquiry and agency, skills for lifelong learning, conceptual understanding. Like that's what both methods are all about. So that's a big part of the work I do in consulting with other schools, is going to those schools and modeling how to amplify inquiry in readers and writers workshop and how to cultivate this joy and curiosity and learning. And they really go together so well. So I think that's super exciting to see that more and more schools are embracing both of those methodologies, inquiry and the workshop model. I'm also really excited to see more momentum growing for what's called translanguaging, especially as an international educator, but I think this applies to people educating all over the world because, in the global society we live in now, pretty much no matter where we're teaching, we're going to encounter students who are multilingual, using multiple languages, students who might be new to English if our school's primary language is English. And so I'm excited to see more coming out with translanguaging, which is basically the idea that language skills travel across languages, and our learners should be able to access those skills. So I've been at several international schools that sort of ride on this philosophy of English only, and their students can only use English. And that's unfortunate because it's really not giving those children opportunities to access the entire toolbox, so to speak, that they have. When you think about language, it's really about skills, and those skills are fluid and transferable. So students should be able to use, the skills that they know from their native language, whether it's Korean or Swedish or Japanese, and apply that to the work they're starting to do in English or another language. And that's becoming, there's more being written about translanguaging. It's actually, the concept has been around, I think, definitely since the 1980s, if not before, which is similar to Readers and Writers Workshop. So it's exciting to see some of these things that have been around and have a huge research base around them really starting to get well known and really starting to become something that more and more are recognizing as important parts of learning. So that's exciting to me. At TIS, we use the Readers and Writers Workshop in both our English classes, but also our Japanese classes. And that's been so fantastic to be a part of, especially as a coach, to be able to see, how the workshop model is being used in a different language, but yet it's still all literacy, that it's not really about the language, it's about the methodologies. And then, for example, in our language and literature classes, we have students who they're sitting in language and literature English class, but they might be reading an independent reading book that's in Swedish or Korean or Chinese or Japanese. And I still confer with them in English about their Korean book, so this idea that it's all language, it's all literacy, and that it's all important and it all should be valued. So that's something that's exciting to see too.
That is fascinating, and that's a new term for me, translanguaging, and you're definitely challenging some of my long-held stereotypes about what an English class should be, so thank you for that.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's a great point that, because I know for me, from my background, it was challenging at first too to think, especially so just for listeners out there too, I think, as a language teacher, I thought, well, yeah, but, my class is English, so I need to do whatever I can to help them learn English,
Yeah.
But the more and more that I'm working with students and the more and more I've seen this in action, it is helping them develop English because they're able to use the skills they already have in their home language to help to transfer to what they're trying to do in English, so being able to talk to them about a Chinese book and how they analyze the theme in that book, then they can apply that to what they're reading in class in English as their English grows, and I think it's much more meaningful to the students too, because they're in a place where, now they're not feeling, for lack of a better word, they don't feel stupid. We as teachers know they're not stupid, but for a child, they can feel that way if they're new to English and they can't do anything in English class, even though they're very bright and could analyze so many aspects of literature in their native language. So helping them marry those things and just to keep growing is really powerful.
Well said. And again, yeah, I think you're stretching my expectations, but I'm thinking through what you're describing, and I can definitely see some unique opportunities there. Even the way that I've taught some of my English as a second language learners in the past, maybe I missed some opportunities, but yeah, thank you for that. Moving outside of education, Tonya, what's another area of passion and learning for you? We call ourselves lifelong learners. We have these areas of interest outside of education. Maybe yours is closely related. Sometimes it's hard to get away from our life's main mission, but what is that area for you?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of two things right now. One thing that is a bit more connected to education, and then one that's not as much. So the first, somewhat connected to education, is I really love learning more about how the mind works, but then thinking about how that applies not only to what I'm doing in education, but also to my own personal life. So, for example, thinking about growth mindset and a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I know that for me, growing up as a student, as a child, I definitely had perfectionist tendencies. I was the student, always trying to get straight A's, and those tendencies still crop up for me from time to time. So it's been really helpful for me to learn more about, as a coach too, like more about questioning moves as a coach. Learning more about how to question all or nothing thinking, staying in the present moment, and with growth mindset, embracing that power of yet, that, you don't need to be perfect right now, that we're still learning. So that's really helped me grow personally. I'm not sure if you and listeners are familiar with Byron Katie, but she's written several books and has a website, and one of her things she calls the work is this sort of inquiry-based model of how to question thoughts, that you might have a thought, but then you question, is it really true? Could something else be true? So it helps you get away from this all or nothing thinking. I even wrote a blog post about how you could apply that questioning to what we think about students. Like maybe you think that a student just needs to be more responsible. They're not turning anything in. They need to be more responsible, and how you could turn that around to see different perspectives and see other things that you might be missing. So that's been really powerful in my personal life and in my work life. And then something that's not as education related is I really love to cook and bake and try out new recipes. For several years, I even kept a food blog because I enjoyed it so much. So that's something that's really fun. And I like learning more about different cooking techniques and ways to put tweaks on recipes and things like that.
Very fun. To that last point, I have to say respect, because living in Tokyo, I would imagine it's very easy to order out all the time, I'm sure, but
it is.
Yeah, good for you to keep perfecting a passion that you enjoy. And to the first point, Tonya, about growth mindset, man, I read Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I'm sure you have as well. I read that last year, and a little late to the party, I guess, in some ways, but it is very transformative. And so I started this year just introducing the main ideas to my students and talking about the power of yet. And I'm very happy to say that, throughout the rest of the year, whenever someone pipes up with, I can't draw, then inevitably someone else in the class will respond with yet. And I think that idea, it's kind of a funny little gimmick, but there's a lot of profound truth in that too.
Yeah, no, I love it. There's, you saying that reminded me a lot of times, even though I work with middle schoolers, we'll do a lot of picture book read alouds because they're fantastic. And there's a great, just for our listeners out there, there's a great picture book called Ish. And it's this same concept that it's about the student wanting to be an artist, but feeling they can't really make things. She tries to draw this vase and she says, well, it's vase-ish, like everything is ish,
Yeah.
As she learns to get better. So that was something that along with yet, a lot of our students would say is, well, I'm, doing this ish, like doing it ishly, as they're trying. And what a great frame of mind to have, that you can be a risk taker, you can be open-minded, you can try new things.
Well said. Let's move on to a personal habit, Tonya, that contributes to your success. Is there something that you would say, yes, this is what I do on a regular basis that really allows you to do everything that you do in the classroom?
Yeah, so I think for me, something that makes a huge difference is really doing whatever I can to maintain a balance between my personal life and my professional life and my spiritual life. As educators, and I think all of us as educators just tend to be very mission driven, and passionate, and that's wonderful. But I think it's also really important that we make time for self-care and self-development too, so that we can keep being mission driven and passion driven. So I know for me personally, as a part of my Christian faith, we have every Saturday is a Sabbath for us. So it's a day of rest, and, we don't do any work on that day. And it's really just a day to, we have church service, we reconnect with family, have some time just for Bible study, prayer, those kind of things that go with our faith. So just a time to break from the quote unquote usual routine. And rest and rejuvenate. And I think that's been so important in my life. And I know that if I wasn't, like I've said to my husband many times, if I didn't feel that I was that it was a part of my faith to take this day of rest, then I wouldn't. I would run myself into the ground. Like I recognize the type of person I am. Like I would just keep going. So I think it's been really important for me to have that always consistently, that one day that it's like, nope, I'm stopping and I'm focusing on these other important areas in my life. And of course, I know, there are so many different faiths and beliefs out there. So obviously not everyone is going to have that exact same example, but I do think could be powerful for everyone to find some way in their life to take some time to rejuvenate and to make sure that those other aspects, their emotional well-being, their time with family, those kind of things are being taken care of.
Good words. And you're convicting me, Tonya, because Sabbath is something that my wife and I talk about wanting to keep as well. But man, it gets challenging,
hard, right?
And other things creep in, and Sunday night can often be prep time for the rest of the week and so on. I know you use Saturdays for that purpose. Maybe that would work a little better here at my place. But I think you're right to your broader point about self-care. We do need to take a break, whatever our faith perspective, and we need to take a break and just go for those walks and spend time in nature.
Yes.
and read and have a nice cup of coffee somewhere, whatever it looks like. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because what you were saying, and just be, just be in the present moment. Like when you said a walk in nature or having a cup of coffee, like just being there and I think it's challenging, sometimes you see here it might be you're waiting for a train or and no one is just like in the present moment. I love technology. I'm a huge advocate for technology, but taking a break even from just feeling the need, like you could sit and eat a meal and just enjoy it and not have to be checking your phone, and I think though it's very hard these days, so that's something, I think just taking some downtime and just being can be really powerful.
Tonya, we're moving into some rapid fire recommendations. So we'll start at Twitter. Tell us about a Twitter account or maybe a few accounts that we need to follow.
So this was really hard for me. because I just love Twitter. I've really, a few years ago, I used Twitter a bit, and then I kind of honestly fell out of it. And this past year, I've really gotten back into, you know, checking my feed regularly and keeping up with, you know, what all's out there. And I just think it's a fantastic resource as a professional learning network, a PLN. So it's really hard to narrow it down, but I'm trying to think of just a few key people that I would definitely follow. For all things literacy, I would really recommend Kylene Beers. She's just fantastic. She has several books out there as well that are just wonderful. And what I love about her is she really keeps things real and authentic when talking about the challenges we face and also what's best for kids in today's world and in today's literacy education. So Kylene Beers is fantastic. For inquiry, I really recommend Trevor MacKenzie. He's written at least 2 books on an inquiry mindset, and he's always sharing all these different tweets with the hashtag inquiry mindset. So it really gives you a good feed to follow for all things inquiry. Kind of in a similar vein for innovation, George Couros, which, he has the innovator's mindset and so many tweets that are just inspiring as a leader and teacher, with just empowering students and empowering, if you're a leader, empowering your teachers. And then sort of in that vein with leadership, there's several, so it's really hard. I feel like there are several great Twitter people out there who are always putting out good thoughts with leadership. But one I'm thinking of is Danny Steele. His Twitter handle is Steele Thoughts, and he's always putting out like just little blurbs that get you thinking about leadership. So he has lots of little insightful tweets. Amy Fast is really excellent as well. And Bethany Hill, who started the Joyful Leaders hashtag, she's fantastic to follow too. So those would be my top picks. I know there are so many more, but that's where I would start if I was just starting on Twitter.
That is a great starting lineup. And you just listed some of my biggest Twitter crushes. So thank you for that.
Great minds think alike, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next, Tonya, point us to an edtech tool that you currently love using in your classroom or your day-to-day work.
So I've really like the use of video response with students, sprinkling that in as opportunities for them to respond in a different way. And so 2 tools that I've found really useful are Recap and FlipGrid. Both allow students to respond. They can use their own devices, their smartphones or a computer. They can respond from home. And I've found, especially for my students who are often more introverted, this has been a really great way for their voice to be heard. They may not feel comfortable speaking up in the middle of a class discussion, but when they're at home and they're just talking to their phone, doing a quick video on their phone, they're suddenly, with some students, it's really amazing to see. It's like they're a different person.
Yeah.
And then you watch the video and you're like, whoa, because they're so quiet during class discussions. So it's really been an opportunity to empower students and make sure that all voices are being heard. And also that some students, as a language and literature teacher, of course, we do a lot of writing, which is great. But if that's not the biggest strength for certain students, it gives them an opportunity to show what they know orally as well. So I really like both Recap and FlipGrid.
I've used FlipGrid and love it. I'm not familiar with Recap, so I look forward to checking that out. Next, Tonya, recommend a book, one that you've been reading lately or maybe one of your all-time faves, and tell us why you recommend it.
Yeah, so more recently, I mentioned Kylene Beers earlier as someone to follow on Twitter. I think it was last spring, so roughly a year ago, a little over a year ago, she published Disrupting Thinking, Why How We Read Matters, and that's by Kylene and also Robert Probst, who she's written some other books with as well. And it is just fantastic. For all literacy teachers out there, definitely a must read. Again, Kylene and Bob are so authentic in what they talk about, and it's really about why do we read, reconnecting with our why. That even though certain aspects are important, like vocabulary and those kind of things, what it's really about is connecting with students' hearts, with learners' hearts, and that we read because it changes us. We read because it makes us better people, and we keep learning and growing. So it really ties well with that the whole growth mindset aspect, but how to make sure that that is at the heart of your literacy teaching. And then I also have recently read Who's Doing the Work? That's by Jan Berkins and Kim Yaris. And it's one that definitely gets you thinking, because, it's, I think most of us and most of the listeners too, we really believe in inquiry education. And we know we believe that, but it was filled with good reminders of ensuring that we're really doing that our classrooms really are student driven, and they're the ones doing the work, and that we're just there to help guide and facilitate, but that it's about them and that they're the ones doing and applying. So that was a powerful read as well. And then I'll just say a classic favorite is In the Middle by Nancy Atwell. I love her work. She was way back when I was in university. She was my first introduction to reading and writing workshop. And she was really a trailblazer for that in the middle grades, like making it a component of middle school language arts. And it's just a fantastic book. It's a good foundational book, especially for anyone that might be new to reading and writing workshop.
Okay, good list. From there, we're going to talk podcasts. And, I've started this podcast a few months ago, kind of believing that, audio, on-demand audio is one of the ways forward here as we move into we're already well into the 21st century, but I see it as one of the ways forward in media and education. Tell us about some podcasts that you're enjoying and why we should listen to them as well.
Well, of course, I truly, sincerely enjoy this one. So I think I'm so glad that you started it. Like Teachers on Fire is definitely on my subscription list.
Awesome.
And you're so right that podcasts really, really are a great avenue to use right now, because I know I love them. I know many of my colleagues love them. It's just nice to have those on-demand things to listen to, when you're waiting for the train or bus, or when you're in a long car ride, or when you're walking somewhere. It's just really great to have. And there are so many out there. So I love Teachers on Fire. I also really like the Heinemann Podcast, because a lot of the literacy resources that I read and use, a lot of the new books coming out, Heinemann is the publisher of many of them, and in their podcast they'll often interview those authors. So it's given me a great supporting resource to many of the books I'm reading. So I like the Heinemann Podcast. Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers is really excellent. She keeps it real. She speaks to the heart of so many of the challenges we face, and also just day-to-day aspects of teachers' lives. So I enjoy that one a lot. I also really like My Bad. It's hosted by John Harper, and it definitely gels with everything we believe with growth mindset, because as the title kind of implies, he interviews people about times they did something that wasn't effective, that was their bad, and sort of reflecting on what they learned from that.
Cool.
So it's filled with all sorts of life lessons. Kids Deserve It is another great one. Not only is it a podcast, but it's a great hashtag to follow on Twitter as well. Just all about what's best for kids. What do our kids deserve? And then The Innovator's Mindset is a great one too. So those are some of my top podcasts.
All right. Well, I appreciate those. I had to change the podcast settings on my phone recently to limit each one to just one episode downloaded at a time.
There's too much.
There's too much. But yeah, I'll definitely take a look at each of those. And again, for the listeners, all of the links that Tonya's mentioning, all of these podcasts and Twitter accounts and channels, we'll make sure those appear on teachersonfire.net. Tonya, we're moving into the final questions here. I'd like to hear about YouTube. Now, I know not everyone is using YouTube the same way, but is there a YouTube channel or some YouTube content that you really enjoy?
Yeah, so I'm more of the type who usually is using YouTube where I'll search for certain things, like a specific topic or a specific subject matter that I want to look into. So usually I'm just searching and I'll see what pops up and go from there. So I'm not one to subscribe to a lot of channels personally, but I do regularly watch, I love TED Talks, and also TED Ed has some good ideas for what can be used in the classroom with students. So I do subscribe to both of those channels and watch them pretty regularly, especially just the quote unquote regular TED channel with TED Talks. There are so many fascinating ones out there that I enjoy.
Good picks there as well. Yeah, TED Ed is awesome. I'm going to second that. And then the very last question, Tonya, you're tired, you're at the end of your day, maybe it's your rest day. What are you watching on Netflix right now?
So we just recently, and we as my husband and I, we just recently finished watching The Crown, which was a pretty perfect fit for us because we've always, for years, we love British television, dramas and comedies, and then we love period pieces. So it's both of those. It's basically telling the story of Queen Elizabeth. And so we wrapped up the current season for that not too long ago, and we're excited for the next one, although kind of bummed out, you know how it is once you sort of binge watch something on Netflix and then it's going to be a year or so until the next season comes out and you have to wait. And it's like, no. So we're waiting on that. I'm also a child of the 90s, so I loved every episode of Fuller House that has come out so far on Netflix. Definitely watch those. And then when I think of TV, honestly, a big thing we do when we just want to relieve stress is it's not Netflix, but we have kind of an obsession with the Hallmark Channel, which it's just feel good TV. Some of it can even be, it can get borderline to cheesiness because it's just so feel good, but we love it. And we're kind of amazed the number of romantic comedies that they can produce. It's a little insane, the number of movies they have, but it's good because then we know they're always there for us when we just want like a feel good movie. There's always something from the Hallmark Channel that you can watch. So that kind of sums up what we've been watching lately.
My wife and I finished The Crown a little while ago as well, and didn't you find it's sort of... Now, I did not watch the royal wedding with Prince Harry, but I saw a few of the highlights, and it's kind of neat, right? I mean, don't you feel like you know just a little bit more of the backstory, and it's kind of what's going on behind the scenes?
Yes, totally. No, and we did actually watch a good majority of the recent royal wedding, and it's so funny you mention that because it's true that you kind of feel like now you're in the know, so to speak, which is probably not true at all, because you know how TV is, but you feel like you are, and so it's there were certain moments where you're just thinking, oh, I bet I know what they're really thinking on the inside right now when certain things would happen. So yeah, it is really funny. It does make you feel like you have this deeper insight into what's happening behind the scenes, for sure.
Tonya, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and preparing so well and so thoughtfully for this conversation. What is the best way for the listeners to follow you and get to know your content a little bit more?
And thank you for having me. It's been a blast. I think the two best ways to keep in touch would be my Twitter account, which is at Mrs. Gilchrist, so Mrs._Gilchrist. And then I have a website as well, which is just my name, TonyaGilchrist.com. So that's where they can read all of my latest blog posts or contact me if they want to send me a message, things like that.
All right, Tonya. Well, it's the start of your day there in Japan. Have a wonderful day. And again, thank you so much. Take care. And we look forward to seeing more of your stuff online.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Teachers on Fire, where teachers come to share, learn, and be inspired. Please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review on iTunes, and follow us on Twitter at Teachers on Fire. I'm your host, Tim Cavey, saying goodbye for now, and we'll catch you next time, right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast.